right, hello everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon slash evening. We're excited to kick off our third Urban Forestry Commission meeting. So as chair, I would like to officially call this meeting to order. Thank you. So after that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Vice Chair Jen Kipp, who is going to do a roll call. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Malone. Okay, I'm going to say your name and you respond with present if you are here. Xavier Bay.
Present.
Jose Hernandez.
Present.
Bernie Jackson. Mikel Jean-Baptiste. Jennifer Kipp, present. Dan Lehman.
Present.
Samira Malone.
Present.
Sarah O'Keefe. Gray Alexi. Tom Schreiber.
Present.
Jenny Spencer.
Present.
Divya Sridhar.
Present.
Rick Switalski. Roger Tokars. That concludes the roll call.
Thank you so much, Jen.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I'd like to send a special thank you to our esteemed commission members, as well as all of our attendees of this afternoon's meeting. We're really excited. I think we have a pretty exciting and informative agenda prepared for this afternoon. And I just wanted to highlight that the UFC is proud to serve in an advisory capacity to assist the mayor, City of Cleveland Council, Urban Forestry Section of the Division of Park Maintenance and Properties, and the City Planning Commission in ensuring the benefits many trees provide citizens of the City of Cleveland, making recommendations. Today, we have prepared a very informative agenda, so I'm going to go ahead and transition into that. But before I do so, I just wanted to make note that Director Sarah O'Keefe, who serves as Secretary for Urban Forestry Commission, could not be in attendance today. She's currently traveling out of the country, and she will be in attendance of our next session. Thank you. All right, and if anyone has not yet, please go ahead and sign in at the sign-in sheet. And we'll go ahead and get things moving. So I'll actually transition it back over to Jen for the approval of the minutes.
Okay.
Vice Chair Kipp.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
The meeting minutes from the last Urban Forestry Commission meeting were sent out to everybody on the commission at least a week in advance. That gives you an opportunity to review them. And so at this time, I welcome any changes or edits or anything that needs to be revised to the minutes from the last meeting in April. Okay. We have Roger and Rick Switalski joining us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All
Thanks
right.
for joining us.
Okay, so having, Roger, I'll give you a chance to just get settled. What I was just doing is calling for if there's anything after you reviewed the minutes, if there's anything that you noted that needed to be changed. No, okay, all right. So I'm guessing that we are okay to make a motion.
So moved.
Okay, so the minutes have been approved from the April Urban Forestry Commission meeting.
Or motion.
Oh,
motion to
need a
be
second.
second. Yeah.
Oh, a motion to,
Yeah.
okay,
Yep.
thank you.
So
Thank you, Jenny.
Call for a second.
Second.
Okay,
Yeah.
Oh, Chair seconded. Okay.
Yeah,
okay, you
I'll
said,
second it.
all right,
Yeah.
thank you.
And
All
then
right.
we have to say all in favor.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right,
All right, there we go.
thanks,
We
Jenny.
officially have approval of the meeting minutes. All right, so moving on to unfinished business. So for the sake of today's meeting, we do not have any official unfinished business on the book. So we're going to go ahead and transition right over to our new business, in which I have the great pleasure of giving you guys an overview of the Cleveland Tree Coalition. So we can go ahead and cue that up and I'll jump into that presentation. Thank you. All right, we transitioned into the City of Cleveland slide deck format. Cool. All right, well, thank you so much, everyone who is both familiar and may not be familiar with the Cleveland Tree Coalition. My name is Samira Malone. I am the Executive Director of the CTC. You can actually advise we can advance the slide deck. Thank you. So the mission of the coalition is we are a collaborative group of public, private, and nonprofit entities that all have the vested commitment in increasing Cleveland's tree canopy by way of the Cleveland Tree Plan, which was produced in 2015. The coalition is actually home to 50+ member organizations, and we're all working collectively towards increasing Cleveland's tree canopy from 18% to 30% by 2040. Advance the slide. Thanks. So the role of the CTC is, of course, essentially playing as a convener, and we also play a significant role in fundraising, both for operational support of our organization as well as programmatic support of our partners, all of our 50-plus member organizations. We also play a significant role in shifting public sentiment around the importance and values of trees, as so they provide immense direct and indirect benefits to Cleveland residents. We also, again, serve as a gap filler, so we're constantly looking across the landscape when it comes to our collective urban forestry efforts in the city of Cleveland, seeing where are the opportunities that we need to fill, where are the opportunities that we need to advance work, and really working across our large partnership base to make sure that they have the adequate resources that they need in order to advance their efforts. Go ahead and advance.
One moment, I just want to note that this screen, there's a bit of a lag for the audience, so I apologize.
I forget we have that back there.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks for. All right, so the current structure of the CTC. So we kind of have a two-part structure of our organization. One is our executive committee, and the second is our membership committee. So the executive committee is home to 11 of our most critical partner organizations here in the region to advance our tree canopy goals, as mentioned and visibly seen right up here on the screen. We can go ahead and advance. And as I mentioned previously, we also have a base of 50-plus member organizations that are culminated of both public, private, and nonprofit stakeholders who we convene quarterly. We do resource sharing. We're actively working to support and increase the capacity of those partners to implement both their projects and initiatives that are tree-related and tree canopy growth-related. We also provide grant funding, which I'll talk a lot more in depth about later on in the presentation. And most recently, we actually kicked off this year a series of capacity building workshops. We realized that many of our partners had been doing work for quite some time, but in order for us to advance our very robust goal of trying to reach 18% canopy by 2040, we needed to actively be that partner in helping to increase capacity of our member group. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in the slide deck, and I'm sorry about the little tweak up there. It's a little bit misaligned. Next. So to give a little bit of context as to why we're working so feverishly towards increasing our canopy here in the city of Cleveland. The city of Cleveland currently has an 18% canopy. Just to give a little bit of context as to what is considered a healthy tree canopy in any urban context is 30% or higher. So the city of Cleveland is vastly below that kind of indicator of a healthy tree canopy that has direct impacts on quality of life, on our social determinants of health, even at direct economic impacts on Cleveland residents. In comparison to Cuyahoga County's overall 35% canopy, we still have a significant amount of work to do. And it really highlights, and I'll talk a little bit in the next slide about the disparity, especially across the neighborhoods in that variation of 18% canopy. Next. So of Cleveland's 33 neighborhoods, one of the things that I always make sure that I want to highlight when we're talking about this work of canopy growth and reforestation is that we have to make sure that we're centering and being very intentional about conversations about inequities, specifically racial inequities. When we look across our neighborhoods in the city of Cleveland, it is, if you lay out a redlining map and you look at a tree canopy map in the city of Cleveland and many other cities like Cleveland, you'll see that there are going to be direct correlations. So it's extremely important for us to have a through line of equity in the work that we're doing. So this map was actually produced in 2019 when we did our Cleveland Tree Plan update. This was taking a look at, data for racial impact indicators as well as health impact indicators. So looking at cardiovascular health, looking at asthma rates, and really aggregating that data and highlighting the specific neighborhoods that need to have the most focus on our canopy regrowth efforts. And so, of course, when you look at this data, the concentration of the neighborhoods that have the lowest tree canopy and the highest need are concentrated primarily on the east side. That's not negating the fact that there are definitely neighborhoods on the west side that have significant inequities and need to have work concentrated in those areas, and we're working very closely with them as well. But it really just continued to highlight and elevate the importance of us maintaining and ensuring that the work that we're doing has a through line of equity. Next slide. So I always like to give a visual representation of when I talk about inequities in our canopy. So when I say that we have an 18% canopy across the entire city of Cleveland, that canopy percentage can vary neighborhood by neighborhood. So in a neighborhood like Midtown, the street canopy percentage is 6.5%, which is desperately low in comparison to even the city of Cleveland's overall low tree canopy percentage. And actually, this photo right here is a picture of a street in Mount Pleasant, in which you can see there's very sparse tree canopy. There is some infrastructure that makes way for there to be plantings, but there's still, of course, overhead utility lines that presented themselves to be a conflict. So we're looking at, I like to use this as a visual because, next slide. You look at about 2-3 miles outside of the city of Cleveland and to a neighborhood like Shaker Heights, where there is an immense and lush tree canopy percentage. This isn't far from the city of Cleveland's boundaries, but again, highlighting the fact that there have been so many equities, both systemically, naturally, procedurally, that has resulted in us having a low tree canopy percentage here in the city of Cleveland, but most specifically lower tree canopy percentages in Black and brown and low income communities. Next. So how we got here, we didn't get here in a vacuum, right? So we think about the fact that, of course, pests and invasive species have played a major role in our decline, as well as environmental degradation, but also things like economic destabilization of cities. The city of Cleveland has experienced quite a few economic situations that has resulted in a smaller tax base, which of course results directly in a decline in services to be able to take care of certain things like our green infrastructure, development pressures, poor planning practices, lack of protective legislation, which I'm really excited and proud of the fact that our body gets a chance to address and rectify some of those challenges, as well as systemic disinvestment, and as I mentioned, structural racism in that disparity in a lot of those neighborhoods that I mentioned previously. Next. So in 2015, there was a call to action. There was a realization that we needed to have a roadmap as to how we were actually going to reforest the forest city. So the city of Cleveland would host these sustainability summits. And in 2013, there were several leaders there who were like, we are losing canopy at a rapid rate. We're actually losing about 75 acres of canopy on an annual basis. And there's something that needs to be done about it. So the Cleveland Tree Coalition was formed. The Cleveland Tree Coalition's actually been in existence since 2015, even though I'm their first full-time director. So after the coalition was formed, that body was like, we need to figure out how we're going to actually advance this work. So the Cleveland Tree Plan came out of that. The Cleveland Tree Plan was produced in 2015. It was a really unique plan in the fact that it engaged multiple stakeholders, not just looking within the environmental landscape, but looking holistically at all of the partners that are going to be needed in order to execute and sustain these efforts of canopy growth. And some of the vision for that required collaborating effectively amongst a variety of stakeholders, as I mentioned, prioritizing trees in government, implementing best practices in forestry, leveraging economic advantages of trees, so on and so forth. And so the plan was originally produced in 2015, and we can actually advance to the next slide. And these are all of the partners that were involved in the process of creating that initial plan. You can go ahead and advance. And so what was really interesting about the Cleveland Tree Plan is that they looked at so many data sets to really evaluate and target how we were going to achieve this canopy growth. So as I have listed here, what was really cool, it was a really cool deliverable that came out of that process was looking at the 12 quantified tree benefits. So it really looked at these kind of high-level issues, as well as challenges and benefits that trees provide to an area, and broke that out by neighborhood. So some of those include floodwater and pollution reduction, property values, energy savings, erosion prevention, clean air, habitat for wildlife, and really getting a holistic view of the benefits that trees provide to a neighborhood. And then on the other side of that, neighborhoods that don't have those benefits or there's a significant disparity in those benefits being received. Next. All right. Out of that planning process, there were 3 goals that came. So goal 1 was a shift in thinking about, was looking at how the coalition could play a significant role in shifting perception and thinking about the importance and values of trees. So understanding that, of course, we have this goal to increase tree canopy, but there are also varying sentiments and ideals and realities around the relationship that Cleveland residents have to trees, right? There are plenty of folks who view trees and tree canopy as a benefit. There are plenty of folks that also view it as a liability, and that's for a multitude of reasons. That's because of lack of resourcing in their communities. That's because trees, because a lack of maintenance, have presumed themselves to be some type of threat or liability. So really looking at the ways in which we're using our voice to communicate and share not only Cleveland Tree Plan data, but actually provide a baseline of education, and also looking at the value alignment for trees. One of the things that I always like to say in doing this work, especially what drew me to this work, is that it's not just about me standing on a soapbox talking about why trees are important. It has to be in a value alignment with your everyday survival. Unfortunately, in the city of Cleveland, so many residents are tasked with the responsibility of surviving. So it is our due diligence to make sure the work that we're doing not only is just increasing and improving our environment, but really making it tangible to how that work is also connecting to people's individual sustainability of self, sustainability of home, and then their sustainability of community. Goal 2 is to reverse the trend of canopy loss, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a couple of slides. And then goal 3 is to assume stewardship for the tree infrastructure. We can advance. Let me get a little water, I'm parched. So after the goals were created, then we devised action items. And so what I wanted to highlight here, of course, not going over every single action item, although I definitely implore you guys to take a look at them, and then I'll actually take a look and read the plan if you have the opportunity to. But one of the things I wanted to highlight is that the Urban Forestry Commission has an immense opportunity to really advance several of the action items of the Cleveland Tree Plan. So the first, of course, being to complete a comprehensive tree inventory, which I know that there's been plenty of tree inventory activity, both through the Healthy Urban Tree Canopy Grant and some of the other grant resources through some of our community development partners. But there hasn't yet been a comprehensive tree plan in quite some time. So being able to execute that, develop and implement a management plan for city-owned trees, undergo an operational review, and then institute policy changes supportive of urban forestry. So I'm really excited about the opportunity for us to be able to advance that work. Again, when we think about the Cleveland Tree Plan, this document was created in 2015. It was updated in 2019, but we still have significant work to do. And the role that we play on this commission plays a huge part in advancing it. Next. All right, so this visual is kind of from this is from the 2019 update. So in taking a look at the goal that we set in 2015 to reach 30% canopy by 2040, we needed to have tracking and indication on how we're going to do that. So currently right now, the city of Cleveland is planting anywhere between that no net loss total, which is about 5,000, I think 255. My glasses will not allow me to see that far right now. But in order for us to actually effectively hit that goal, we need to be planting 28,000 trees per year on an annual basis. And that does not happen overnight. It can't happen overnight, because if it does, it's not going to sustain itself. But that is the benchmark for that's the benchmark for what we need quantified to be able to reach that goal. So there's still a significant amount of work to be done, not only just for planting trees. I know that we talk very often about that in the context of canopy growth, but what's simultaneously important is the actual establishment of those trees, and then also the maintenance of our mature and existing canopy. Although the city of Cleveland only has an 18% canopy, maintaining that healthy age distribution in our existing canopy is going to be literally the bedrock of how we're going to be able to continue and sustain actual canopy growth. Next slide. And so underneath the purview of the coalition, so the dark green trees are trees that are planted by CTC members, and then the light green are trees that are given away through tree distribution projects. We actually are in the process of getting ready to update our numbers for 2022 and 2023 through our surveys. But we've been able to pretty much give out on an annual, underneath the coalition, members are able to typically plant on an annual 25 to 5,000 trees on a yearly basis, and then give out anywhere between 3,000 to 5,000 trees on an annual basis. And we're looking to, of course, increase that number through our various efforts, whether it be through the regranting program of the CTC, our partners over at the county. I'm actually going to talk a little bit about a significant fundraising activity that we just participated in collectively towards the end of the slide deck. So we can go ahead and advance. So CTC development, as I mentioned, a key role of the CTC is fundraising and bringing resources into the city in order for us to advance our efforts. So I'm really proud to share the work that we've been able to do over the last year. As I mentioned, I've served in tenure as executive director for a year. Actually, May was my year anniversary date. But the CTC, we recently received an earmark from Senator Sherrod Brown. So we got a $1.5 million earmark that is to support both the operational and programmatic elements of the CTC. And of course, that goes directly to our regranting efforts. We also receive funding and support by the Cleveland Foundation, Mount Sinai Foundation, Danelia Foundation, Sears Wetland Foundation, ODNR, NOPEC, and Cleveland Votes. And that has supported the last year of both our regranting efforts, all of the workshops we've been able to provide, as well as I mentioned, my operational cost. And we're in the process of developing a business model through our strategic planning. We're actually going to be kicking off a survey this week where we're trying to get a better idea of how much budgeting for projects and efforts are for all of our partners so we can begin to fundraise and project fundraising for that. So there are going to be quite a few folks in this room who are actually going to receive that survey. So please fill it out. But it's really been exciting. I mean, in order for us to actually move this work forward, there's a significant amount of money that needs to be raised. I mean, trees are not free and they shouldn't be, right? Because they provide an immense benefit to the community. And I will always use this platform as an opportunity to say that they're a critical piece of infrastructure and should be invested in so as such. So I'm proud that the coalition gets to play a significant role in that. We also work with many of our public partners like the City of Cleveland, Cuyahoga County and their Healthy Urban Tree Canopy Grant to make sure that we're coordinating and concentrating as much resources in the City of Cleveland. Work very closely with the state as well as have been recently deeply engaging with the federal government. All right, advance. Thank you kindly. So as mentioned, the CTC provides direct resources to our partners here in the City of Cleveland. So right now, through the Ohio Department of Natural Resources and the NOPEC Energized Communities Grant Programs, we're able to provide previously up to $50,000 grants to our community partners for their tree planting projects and then the subsequent establishment of those trees. So our first round of grant funds we provided in February of 2022, and we were able to award those partners that are listed on the screen. We were able to give out $311,000 that year, and that totaled into about 280 trees in the ground. And then in August of 2022, we did another grant cycle in which we were able to award those partners that you can slightly see at the bottom. Sorry, you guys, there's a little bit of formatting issue, but I can always share out the slide deck with the collective afterwards. And then that total award was $150,000, and that resulted in 262 trees. We can go ahead and advance this one. And so we're coming up on that timeline again. So we're excited to be able to continue our regranting efforts. So we're actually getting ready to kick off our second year of our grant program. So in August of 2023, we'll be releasing a grant, which again, partners are able to pay for planting and establishment as well as free tree distribution. We're actually in the process of finalizing what that range amount is going to be because we really want to make sure that we can increase it to an amount that's going to be beneficial to our partners. So more to come of that, but it's definitely going to be a larger max than $50,000. And we just, again, as somebody who is both simultaneously on the end of writing grants and giving out resources, I always try to make sure that the process is as accessible and end user friendly. And we'll talk a little bit about that during our second line, one of our line items a few down when we get to subcommittees. But I think that Our grant has been really beneficial and helpful to a lot of our community partners, and we try to work with folks and be as reasonable and be a hands-on partner as much as we can. It's not about making unnecessary hoops that you have to jump through to get resources, because our end goal is increasing canopy. So we really try to embody that partnership with our coalition members to make sure that they have everything that they need. All right, next slide. This one's one of my favorites. So I, just to share with the group, my background is in community development. So I came into this work through a community development lens as an urban planner. And one of the things in coming into this work that I, especially as executive director of this organization, I really wanted to make sure that we had a framework for community partners to be able to develop their own tree planting efforts and initiatives. One of the things that I was really proud to be able to do when I was at Midtown was develop our neighborhood's reforestation efforts, in which we kicked off a significant tree inventory and have done robust plantings every year since then. But I realized that, especially when we're thinking about the neighborhoods that have the lowest tree canopy and are disproportionately impacted by that disparity in canopy, those are often simultaneously the neighborhoods that do not have the resources, whether it be actual physical staff capacity or funding resources, to be able to kick off these projects. So what we wanted to do was create a framework, literally a roadmap as to how these neighborhoods can begin to build up their reforestation efforts, their planting efforts, whether it be them coming in and doing a large planting and establishment project of 150 trees or 5 trees, but really just making sure that, again, we're serving as that platform and that partner and that resource to them. So I was really proud of the workshop that we put together. There was actually quite a few folks on the commission who participated, and I really appreciate all of they brought to that process. We partnered with Davie Resource Group. We partnered with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, Holden Forest and Gardens, and IYI Networks to create a workshop series. And some of the topics that we covered during that were general overview of tree planting projects, how to develop a good tree project, grant management, examples of other community tree projects, Tree Care 101, working with contractors. We actually did a networking event in which we brought tree care contractors and CTC members, specifically the CDCs, in the room so they can actually have a relationship with each other and understand what resources are out there in the landscape for them to then plug into these grant opportunities that come down the pipeline. So we had immense success. I think we had a really, really great turnout, actually. We're excited about bringing this back in year 2, probably in 2024, because we facilitated quite a few workshops. But I think it was extremely beneficial and we got great feedback for it. So really excited and to have opportunities like this, as I mentioned a few slides back, and playing a significant role in partnership for capacity building for our partners. So we can go ahead and advance. As I mentioned a few slides back as well, the CTC plays a major role in looking to increase that role every day and elevating the importance of trees. So of course, we do a lot in the lane of elevating the mission of the CTC through various media coverage. We also are in the process of developing our own internal CTC partner messaging. As I mentioned, we're finalizing our strategic plan because we want to make sure that we have a unified voice that we get a chance to share and build with all of our partners. We also send out a quarterly newsletter. We actually just sent out our most recent quarterly newsletter, so I hope a few of you guys got a chance to see it. We're also in the process through our strategic plan exploring and developing an education campaign, which we're really excited about. I think that education really is the bedrock of our work, and not only just education for residents, but education for policy and decision makers in the city of Cleveland and beyond. And then, of course, as I've mentioned several times, we serve as a convener and a platform and just continuously sharing out resources and opportunities to our coalition members. We can go ahead and advance. And lastly, but certainly not least, actually one more slide after this, but lastly, but certainly not least, we are playing a significant role, both in my capacity here as chair, and even on the state and federal level in advancing policy, legislation, and funding for canopy growth here in the city of Cleveland. We have the great fortune of having public partnerships with Cuyahoga County's Office of Sustainability, of course, the Urban Forestry Commission, the City of Cleveland Office of Sustainability, the section of urban forestry for the city of Cleveland, ODNR, and we have a very close partnership with Senator Sherrod Brown. But we understand that in order for us to advance this work, it has to be a collective understanding and constant advocacy around not only the value and benefits of trees, but as I mentioned, how we are intentionally investing in them as critical pieces of infrastructure, both from the funding standpoint as well as the policy and legislation. Next. And so I'm gonna do this presentation, and then I'm gonna transition over to Vice Chair Kip to give a little bit more context on the city's portion of this request. So back in May, the U.S. Forest Service released a notice of funding. The IRA made a $1.5 billion investment into community and urban forestry. This is probably the largest investment they've made in community and urban forestry in 100 years. And so it was a really unique and timely opportunity for the CTC and its partners to put in a request. Organizations were invited to submit up to $50 million request for various tree-related activities. So that was planting, education and engagement, increasing capacity for Urban Forestry Commission. Not Urban Forestry Commission, for urban forest maintenance. And we're really proud of the compelling request that we put together. We had already been convening partners far before the notice of funding. So we kind of had known through our regional and national partners that the CTC played a major role in lobbying for the initial IRA investment into community and urban forestry. So we knew it was coming down the pipeline. So we began convening an IRA task force of the partners who would be involved in putting forth this request. So by the time the notice of funding became available, I think we were really equipped to be able to turn around and put together a compelling request. And so those partnerships included the Western Reserve Land Conservancy underneath the umbrella of the coalition, the City of Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, Cleveland Neighborhood Progress Trust for Public Land, Student Conservation Association, Holden Forest and Gardens, and what's this?
Metro
Brittany,
Parks.
can you tell me, is this the Metro Parks that
Metro
I'm looking
Parks.
at? Yeah, Metro Parks. Sorry, guys, it's wonky and I can't see. But the request that we put forth was for $48 million. And as I mentioned, we really put forth a holistic effort to address education and neighborhood engagement, tree planting establishment, as well as increasing capacity for maintenance. And so we won't find out about the awarding for that until October 1st. So we have to kind of sit on pins and needles until then, but I'm very confident in the request that we put forward. I was really proud of all of the collective efforts and the demonstration of collaboration that we put forth into that request. And then the City of Cleveland was also involved in an additional IRA request in partnership with the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence Governors and Premiers organization. And they're actually a major regional collaborator of partners for environmental and economic development, in which Jen will talk a little bit more about her presentation. But all in all, I just wanted to do first a presentation on the Cleveland Tree Coalition, because I know quite a few of you are very steeped in the work. You work very closely with the CTC. There are also quite a few commission members and those out there in the public that aren't familiar of the coalition or have heard of us, but don't quite know what our role is in the landscape. So I really just wanted to elevate that through the commission, and both how the two roles that I play as both chair and executive director, chair of commission and executive director of that organization. And I'd be more than happy. We'll have a little time baked in after Vice Chair Kip. After Vice Chair Kip's presentation for questions on anything that I've presented. But thank you for giving me the floor to talk a little bit more about the role of the CTC, especially in partnership with the City of Cleveland.
All right, thanks, Chair Malone. So as Sam said, so of the $48 million that the Cleveland Tree Coalition put forth, I'm sure folks are interested on what is the piece that the City of Cleveland Urban Forestry Section requested. And so I'm going to give you just a brief overview of what that is. Next slide, please. So ultimately, a lot of what informed the City of Cleveland's ask was taken from the Cleveland Tree Plan, as Sam mentioned in her presentation. So the 2015 Tree Plan had specific action items that were recommended, and one of them, several of them are here in this ask, but one of them was to develop a complete citywide tree inventory and planting site inventory. And just so you know what I mean, a planting site is a tree lawn that has no tree that could potentially have a tree after it's, see if it meets our guidelines. So that is something that I don't know that we have had. Maybe it's been decades since the city had something comprehensive. So it's really difficult to manage what we don't know we have. So we're estimating that's $1 million. And then once the inventory is completed, then that would inform the management plan, right? So we know what we have now, we've done the inventory, here's how we're gonna manage it. And that has been through the federal earmark from that the CTC received that they are allocating to the city of Cleveland for that management plan. Then operations review, again, this is taken right out of the 2015 Cleveland Tree Plan, and operations review of my section. What's our productivity look like? What's our staffing levels? What's our, skill level? How do we need to increase capacity? Do we need to increase capacity? By how much? And then we need a GIS analyst. And I know that I have, for certain, Jose, in the Division of Water, you have a full-time GIS analyst, right? Like helping to make sure that you have 4. Okay. Well, I'm requesting one because ultimately that's where everybody needs to talk to each other in the city of Cleveland, and all of our infrastructure is considered an asset, including the trees, right? Mm-hmm. So if we all share this one GIS layer that shows all of our different assets and how they play nicely together or don't, but we do need that GIS support to make sure that neighborhood level inventories are captured correctly using our GIS layer, and that we're not just importing multiple layers every time somebody has a special project in a neighborhood. So it needs to just be one comprehensive shared inventory of public trees, and then build hopefully on private trees too. Because I'm guessing most of us in this room know that the canopy, the private land has much greater capacity to grow canopy than public land. So ultimately, we would like to be able to share all that information with all the partners. Let's see what's next. Oh, hire a field operations forester. So this is huge, to manage the maintenance contracts. So if we're going to increase capacity, then that means we're also going to increase the assistance that we get from our contractors. And I'll talk a little bit more about who the contractors are and what they do in the city of Cleveland. But we need someone to be out there and make sure that they're following the specifications. I mean, just based on concerns that I get from residents, like a tree is still staked. It was planted 2 years ago. It still has a stakes. So those kinds of QA/QC things, making sure that those contractors are following our specifications to the letter and holding them accountable if they don't. And then lastly, the maintenance for mature trees on city property in the public right-of-way, that's a $4.5 million request because there is just decades of deferred maintenance on city-owned trees. Again, I'm guessing folks are not surprised to hear that. Next slide, please. Okay, and then Sam touched a little bit on this as well. So we were very, very lucky to have the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Governors and Premiers group through Chair Malone's connection. They also put in their proposal. So they did a separate proposal to the federal government, and they included some things for the city of Cleveland in their proposal. So some personnel for the Cleveland Tree Coalition, 1.49 million to plant and establish 2,000 trees, and then a $583,000 investment in developing a plan to rebuild the canopy with recommendations to ensure those trees are established.
And one thing I'd like to note in terms of the figures themselves, so this is the collective of 5 years. So the funding that's available through the IRA Community Urban Forestry Grant is available for a 5-year grant period. So all of the figures you see above will be broken out over that time.
Thank you. That's an important point.
So
Okay.
now,
Oh, go ahead.
do you have other? Oh yeah, capital plan. There we go.
All right.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I've got 3 in a row here.
You're good.
So, okay, moving on to urban forestry budget. And I know we're giving you a lot of information in the last half an hour. So I see some folks taking notes. There will be time for Q&A at the end. So appreciate everyone's patience as we get through this. So urban forestry budget. This is, I believe, just one slide. Next slide, please. This is essentially how the urban forestry section in the city of Cleveland is funded. So I have 22 full-time employees. The general fund, which are the tax dollars, that fund pays for our salaries and our benefits. All of the contractual work that I do, i.e. planting, stump grinding, and removal and pruning assistance, that's all from bond sales, capital dollars. And what we are having some internal conversations right now because we need to identify, and maybe this isn't, again, like something this group can make a recommendation about, is we need some sort of long-term sustainable funding source for urban forestry, and have it be less about, vary from year to year. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be sustainable year after year. So we have, I think once we get to the committee section, there's an opportunity to kind of explore that a little bit, so that it's the success and failure, if you will, doesn't depend on, so many different factors. Next slide, please. All right, now we're going into Tree Commission Academy. So many folks in this room attended the freshman class of Tree Commission Academy. And I'm just going to go through like what my takeaways are. I know that Dan, thank you. You shared at the last meeting because we were in that same freshman class together. And some of the takeaways that I wanted to share with the group are just based on, kind of what stuck out to me that I learned there. Next slide, please. So the trees on private property, what we need to focus on are threats to the right of way according to the Ohio Revised Code. So we are responsible for public lands, and the Ohio Revised Code section is 723.01. So the municipal government, the municipality, has to focus on keeping our rights of way clear and low risk. We have a duty of care. We have to look for predictable failures, whether or not they're brought to our attention. So I have 4 field operations foresters. They drive around and look at trees in the city all day. It is they have that duty of care, as do I. If I see a tree that looks like it's imminent, risk for failure, I have to do something about that within a certain time frame. An active nature, a tree failure undetected based on routine inspections and good records. Our inspections are complaint driven, so we do not perform any kind of routine inspections of trees. Negligent failure, property owner, for example, the property owner cut roots for the new sidewalk. We learned the city would be held liable because the city can pass on the financial burden of the replacement sidewalk to the abutting owner, but not the legal responsibility. And I believe that's in ORC 723.011. All right, next slide, please. There was they shared with us a study that was done. It's from 1981. I'm guessing that there's probably a more recent study, but Drs. Miller and Sylvester did a study that was basically trying to compare, like, what is the cost of an unmaintained urban forest versus if you did, invested so much money year after year. And what they found, no surprise, an unmaintained urban forest, you have more resources being deployed to handle emergencies instead of doing that systematic pruning to reduce the risk of those trees failing in the first place. And what they found is, in an ideal situation, a 5-year pruning cycle for trees is the most ideal. How to reestablish the forest? That's what we're all tasked with here today. The 10-20-30 rule for species diversity. So when you have diversity, you have a population of trees that's more stable. So 10-20-30 refers to like no more than 30% of one family, 20% of one genus, 10% of one species. The recommendation is to replace 10 to 20% of trees in the tree lawn per year. Because what we're trying to do is look at that age distribution, right? So you want the age spread out, you want the species to be diverse, to have your just the most resilient, healthy forest you can have. Million trees efforts. I'm sure, I don't know if anyone's really on this bandwagon anymore, but a lot of people were in the about 10 years ago. And there were a lot of trees that went in the ground very quickly. There was no establishment plan. There was, no consideration for age diversity. So all the trees will then essentially reach their maturity and decline and die at the same time. And then avoid planting tough trees in good sites. So that means if we've got, like a 20-foot wide tree lawn, no overhead wires, that's an ideal spot for a tree that is maybe more sensitive, needs a little bit more care. It's not like your downtown tree, right? All the downtown trees basically the same. We have a monoculture of honey locust trees because those are so tough. They're so tough. We don't need a honey locust tree on a 20-foot wide tree lawn. Let's put something else there. And then the executive committee during the Euclid freshman class. So there are some folks in this room who are at the Euclid freshman class. And I was not in the room during this particular presentation, but it was on social urban forestry. And so what the executive committee did was we got together and we drafted a letter to ODNR because there was some very, very significant concern from members, not only Cleveland members in the freshman class, but other community members about some sort of inference. One slide came up and there was, the slide inferred that a black or brown teen girl was impulsive. And then the conversation went in a direction that was really very destabilizing, might be a good word. And so we're sending a letter so that ODNR knows that we would like that slide to be removed, and that we would like them to review all of their cited references in the curriculum, because we did try to go to the cited material and found nothing to support what was on the slide. And that, next slide, please. And then we'll go.
Yeah.
Okay. So save the date, the sophomore class, we'd like to all kind of, convene the whole group of us, the Cleveland group, go to the sophomore class, August 8th and 9th in Euclid. So if you guys please save that date on your calendar, I think we can even send a save the date email. And then the registration deadline for that is July 28th. And the next topics of the sophomore class is going to be municipal relations, soil, one of my favorites, planting design, inventory, and destructive pests. And next slide, please. We have questions, but before we go to the questions, I just wanted to invite Chair Malone or other members of the commission who are at the Euclid freshman class. If you have any comment, we'll start with Chair about the letter that we're writing.
Yeah, I definitely think that there was a consensus from quite a few members, not only from the Cleveland Urban Forestry Commission, but also other participants in the room around the appropriateness of the data that was presented during that discussion. And so as members who are participating in this commission training from the city of Cleveland and from other municipalities, we really want to make sure that we're elevating important and relevant data to the work that we're doing, especially data that isn't harmful or hurtful to the very communities that we're serving. So we really wanted to respond to that and be a partner in the sense that we want to elevate that we share relevant data, and then even seeing the ways in which we can play a role in partnership in putting together what that could possibly be, right? So we really are we're really adamant about making sure that we give that follow-up back to the group, especially in advance of us participating in our second session. And I really appreciate everyone's comments and feedback that they gave during that, and we'll continue to do so. We're in the process of drafting the letter, so we definitely open up the floor to folks who want to give any type of insight or feedback on any other points of interest that they'd like to elevate to be included in that letter as well. If anybody else from the Euclid class or any other class, I know that there was very similar information that was presented, wants to provide any comment or feedback, feel free to. If not.
I have a relevant takeaway from the sophomore class, and that's that there is such a thing as an enforcement risk. So there are risks to specifically enforce ordinance and fine people. I think that's something really important for us to consider.
Absolutely. Especially extremely relevant to commission. Anybody else?
Yeah, and anything about any of the presentation that
Oh, yes.
that Chair Malone and I.
We officially open up floor for questions on presentations too.
Yeah.
I just had a quick question or point of clarification. There was 2 Cleveland urban forestry management plans mentioned, and I want to make sure I understand the distinction. One was mentioned in the IRA, and the other is a Kent State collaborative.
Yeah.
Are those essentially the same urban forestry management plan, or are they different?
So the Kent State portion of the request is separate from the urban forestry management plan. So currently, the CTC has a federal earmark from Senator Sherrod Brown, in which we allocated $100,000 towards the urban forestry management plan for the city of Cleveland in that earmark. But the total cost of the urban forestry management plan is $300,000.
Got it.
So that's where the additional $200,000 request in the IRA came from. Thank you.
But that does, that raises a point for me that I don't think I understood before, but the city of Cleveland is eligible to apply for grants from the.
Yes,
Industry Code.
yes, they're eligible
That
to
is
apply for this. Yes.
Awesome, thank you.
However, all grants are $50,000.
So we're actually
Per-
going to increase that maximum, but as of the previous years, the max was 50,000, but we're looking to increase that range significantly.
Chair Malone, can you share a little bit about the grant and say what it might be eligible for? Do we
Absolutely.
have to stick to planting and maintenance, or does it cover the other parts of the process of
Yeah.
planning, planting, maintenance and everything?
Yes, so as of right now, with the resources that we have, the CTC grant is restricted to planting and establishment. Although we are extremely, we're extremely interested in partners being able to really put forth a request that incorporates a significant time span of establishment, because understanding that establishment goes past just 1 year of planting and watering and staking and mulching. So we always tell our partners whenever they're putting forth their request to the CTC to think about 3 years of projected cost for that tree. And we're looking to, of course, continue to expand that resource that we have available in hopefully the near future to maintenance of existing and mature tree canopy. But as of right now, the CTC grant covers planting and establishment of trees. And then also we're going to be incorporating a new element, which is going to be tree redistribution. So if a partner organization wants to apply and they also want to facilitate some type of free tree giveaway in their community, there's also going to be resources made available for that as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll jump in. Oh, go ahead, Rick.
I just have a housekeeping question.
Yes.
In terms of the upcoming class in August,
Mhm.
registration the 28th.
Mhm.
Last time it was done for us,
Forest.
mine was, is that gonna be the same thing again, or how do we do that?
I'll actually,
We'll take care of those
Extra Kip,
registrations.
yeah,
Yeah,
we'll take care of that.
yeah.
Are we all going to the August one? I guess that's the last sophomore class, right?
Well,
This year, at least.
I don't know if
We
it
had
is.
This was back in July was the first
July
one.
was the first one, so August is the
Oh.
last one.
You're right, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 weeks, 3 weeks after the one that we had.
Yeah. So we can follow up and coordinate that over the next week and make sure that those who are interested in participating in this upcoming session, we make sure we get you guys registered. Thank
And
you.
then who's the other one, what's that one and last one? In terms of our homework, that sounds a lot like our urban forestry division work.
Yes.
And we know who's the best to answer that question, but will that be done?
That's a great question, Rick.
It
Yeah,
might even be a
the
subcommittee homework
freshman,
project.
yeah, the freshman class homework. Thanks for that reminder.
I remember, but a lot of it was how was our urban forestry division operating, how was it working?
Right. Right. So could we put it out that we would possibly meet separately to complete the homework?
yeah,
Because it's
absolutely.
specific to the class,
Yeah.
not, okay,
Absolutely.
okay,
There's definitely the opportunity
Okay.
to convene
And
separately
I will-
around that.
okay, great. And I'll take the lead on that as well, since, yeah, Jose, did you have something? Yeah,
I did
please.
attend the sophomore class already,
Okay.
and I'm on the homework page.
Okay.
And they do encourage everybody from the same city to work together on this.
Okay.
So I can set up. And not only that, but I guess, and I can't think about this, but town to work with a specific area.
Yeah, the sophomore class homework will involve, it's a
I
little more
did visit
involved.
from the ODNR.
Okay.
So maybe we can coordinate that as well.
Absolutely. I think there's definitely an opportunity to coordinate that through our committee and we can do our subcommittees. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that later.
And
Yeah, I think
thank
there
you,
are-
Jose. So who else? I was gonna ask,
I think
who,
there's 4 of us who completed the sophomore class, Ray, Dan.
okay, Dan, Gray, Tom, Jose, perfect, thank you, okay.
So we'll follow up with more details in the next week to begin coordinating for those of us who haven't had the opportunity to attend the sophomore class and go ahead and get that ready.
The IRA stand for?
Oh, I'm sorry, we love to throw around our acronyms, don't we? Inflation Reduction Act.
Okay.
Yep, so Inflation Reduction.
In terms of infrastructure.
Yep.
roadways, but-
Nope, the exact same ones, in a specific allocation over to US percent. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
I wanted to comment that that was a lot of rich information in those slides in regards to funding, budgets.
Yeah.
There was a lot there. So I think that, there could be potentially a lot of questions. I'm going to try to distill down a couple of here.
Absolutely.
One was related to going back to the Inflation Reduction Act request that the CTC convened all the partners.
Yep.
City of Cleveland's portion of that overall request is $6.5 million. I know that a lot of thought was put into the Cleveland request and what was the right scale and what should be included. I wanted to make sure I understood though, we don't necessarily need to pull up the slide. There was the partner proposal, and I didn't write it down quickly enough, the Great Lakes Governors and Premiers.
Yep.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
So this is a separate organization
Yes.
that also submitted an IRA request.
Yes.
On that slide, were those funds, that total amount, was that exclusive to the city of Cleveland? Or was that slide related to their request to be spread across?
That was exclusive to the city of Cleveland.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
So they also put in a large,
a
similar
larger request,
Yep.
and they broke down. So it seemed, if I understood correctly, it seemed like their request, if funded, would account for more of tree planting.
Correct.
And could we speak to that a little bit, and just about the interplay between the Cleveland submission and then the partner submission? And well, we hope they're all funded, right?
Yes.
First of all.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So I can broach that first,
Sure.
and then I'll leave to Jen to talk a little bit more about the city of Cleveland's planting efforts as a byproduct of that. So of course, the CTC put forth the large funding request, but we had the opportunity presented itself to be a part of the St. Lawrence request because we've been working in partnership with them. We've been really doing some like deep relationship building, and they are working across several Midwest cities. Around economic development and capacity building for those municipalities to look at things like Jen has discussed, how do we establish a streamlined and sustainable funding mechanism for forestry efforts? And what they wanted to do is part of their request, which wasn't mentioned on the slide deck, is that they're going to be working with a consultant firm an economic development consulting firm to help work with cities to develop their own funding models for their forestry efforts. And then also, they wanted to, in addition to us being their partners, they wanted to be able to provide us direct resources as partners on that grant. So that's where that opportunity presented itself from. So of course, knowing that those are two competitive grant applications essentially, but again, the federal government has elevated the fact that they are willing to even award competing grant applications within the same region if they're speaking collectively and comprehensively to how they are going to help support one another. So one of the things that we did in working with St. Lawrence is demonstrating how the partnership with them was going to build upon the efforts that we have identified through the Cleveland Tree Plan and what we spoke directly to in our framework for our IRA request.
Okay. And again, I know that the slides will be shared out,
Absolutely.
so I didn't take perfect notes here about what that funding, that portion of the funding request would be, but it's good to know that that amount would be coming fully to the city of Cleveland if awarded.
Yep.
Okay. I also wanted to mention, and I know we're going to talk about this later in today's agenda, I think your next item related to subcommittees, which I think will be a rich discussion. But the urban forestry budget slide, again, I think it's so important that all of us as commission members, we'll keep leaning into understanding how the city currently funds its urban forestry activity.
Yep.
General fund being staffing levels,
Yep.
and then capital budget being everything else that
Yep.
urban forestry needs to function. So I'm kicking myself because Vice Chair Kip has shared this with me before, and I don't have the number handy in my mind, remembering it, but we talked in the past about, the generally speaking, what is year over year, a round number for what capital budget, what urban forestry does get to the capital budget. I would appreciate a reminder about that, and I can also speak offline about that. But I think that would be a good, as we continue together to understand what is a typical in a year that City of Cleveland has 62 million in total bonding capacity year over year. And all of the infrastructure needs of the city hold into that bigger number. I think it would be really enlightening for the commission to have just sort of that general knowledge of generally speaking, year over year, what has urban forestry received in terms of capital funds?
Yeah, I'll definitely be happy to share that with you.
Okay,
Yeah.
And
thank you.
And as you mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about that in subcommittees, but I think that'll definitely be a significant area of interest for the subcommittee groups to chew over and think about not only just where we're currently at, but what we're looking to grow to in terms of a sustainable budget, a larger sustainable budget for the City of Cleveland's urban forestry section. So thank you so much for those comments and feedback. All right, if there aren't any other questions, yeah.
I did have one more, and I think that might come in at some point into the subcommittees. So Chair Malone, you can tell me if this should be waiting for that opportunity. It's really around how different, as the role of the Urban Forestry Commission is formed, there are some best practices in other cities that include some of the things that we are addressing at a rampant rate with respect to our canopy laws.
Yep.
And one of those things being the permitting process,
Yep.
and really trying to bring that into a hearing of the Forestry Commission.
Yep.
And how that really then goes back and connects with the design review and the other conversation. So if this is a conversation for a subcommittee at a later point, we can have that, but just wanted to make sure that I brought that up as I was perusing other cities' ordinances.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you actually elevated that point, and I think that is definitely something that we can continue to have ongoing conversation and even forming a subcommittee around the establishment and creation of some type of through line in which we can have various projects come in front of us, very similar and akin to design review, planning commission, things of that nature. So we can talk a lot more about that, but I appreciate you for elevating that and that we have that on the record as a potential subcommittee. All right.
Maybe a good segue into.
Right. Well, you guys alley-ooped me and gave me a great segue, so thank you. All right, so we're going to go ahead and transition over to the next line item, which is going to be subcommittees. So this is all very new because we are a new commission. So I did a little bit of homework and research myself on the establishment of subcommittees. So let me go ahead and actually read a governing definition of subcommittees, and then I'll kind of get into what our process is. So subcommittees are defined as usual and deliberative assemblies to have preliminary work in preparation of matter for their action done by means of committees. The committee may either be a standing committee appointed for a definite time, as a session or a year, or a special or select committee appointed for a special purpose, or a committee of the whole consisting of the entire assembly. So I wanted to just preface that and allow that to be our framework and how we're going to talk about the establishment of committees. I know that I've had the opportunity to have lots of offline conversations with many of folks, and I think that we're all chomping at the bit to begin doing some work and the first part of that is the formation of these subcommittees where the work actually gets done. So I wanted to go ahead and where did I put my notes? Give me just a second. Subcommittees. All right. So when looking at our rules and regulations for the City of Cleveland's Urban Forestry Commission and the establishment of subcommittees, we're not governed by ordinance. So we have a lot of flexibility and free will on how we're going to create both standing and special committees. As far as the actual occupancy of those subcommittees members, each commission has to serve on at least each commission member has to serve on at least one committee, and each committee has to have a minimum of 3 members. Each subcommittee will have a chair. That person will be self-nominate and then be approved by the executive committee. So actually, if we come to the end of this conversation and kind of have some working subgroups that we're interested in coming out of this session, we'd also be looking for folks to throw their hat in the ring as potential chair of those subcommittees. The meeting frequency has to be at least once a quarter, minimum between each commission meeting. So a quarter in between each commission meeting. So we meet on a quarterly basis. So a quarter in between that is the frequency. Number of committees, they're not to exceed 5 at any one time. And they have to align with the current capacity of our commission members to participate, with a minimum of 3 per committee. So I wanted to go ahead and actually define committee types, because as I mentioned, we have both standing committees and we also have the special committee. So a standing committee is either wholly or partially elected at an annual meeting or in ordinance societies. And immediately thereafter, it recognizes by election a chairman unless he has been appointed by the assembly and a secretary. Therefore, a standing committee must report at the annual meeting or before on everything referred to during the year. The motion to rise is never used in standing committees or boards, nor is it used in other committees except when the committee is ready to report so that they will never meet again. A special purpose committee is appointed for a specific purpose, and until the duty assigned it by the society is accomplished, it continues to exist unless sooner discharged, which requires a 2/3 vote if done without notice being given. The fact that an annual meeting has intervened does not discharge a special committee appointed by society, but in an elected or appointed body as convention, special committees that have not been reported cease to exist when the new officers assume their duties at the next annual meeting. When the discharge, the chairman of that committee returns to the secretary all documents received for them. So we have both the opportunity for standing, which in layman's terms is ongoing committees. I know that that was a lot of language, but that is in terms of ongoing committees. And then the special committees are those pretty much ad hoc committees that will arise for particular needs, and they'll be a time-sensitive base. And so, as I mentioned, we've had lots of conversations with folks on the commission around the idea of potential subcommittees. And I think that we're definitely going to walk away from this meeting with some next steps as to what that's going to look like. I did want to frame that we already have one up and running subcommittee, which is our executive committee, which is comprised of myself, Vice Chair Kip, and Secretary Sarah O'Keefe, in which we meet very regularly to make sure that we have the function and flow of our commission meetings and putting together the agendas and things of that nature. But I know that I wanted to note that a few committees that have kind of risen to the top in conversation, of course, are looking at a policy review committee. We're really looking at that underneath playing in a role of being a potential standing committee. And then, as mentioned during the presentation, there is an opportunity for a special purpose subcommittee to form. As mentioned, the CTC is going to be releasing its grant in August. And so there is a very unique opportunity to provide assistance and capacity to the section of forestry and putting together what that potential request for planting is going to be. I, of course, would have to absolve myself from that role, but there's definitely an opportunity to put together a subcommittee for that. So what I wanted to do is, I feel like I've done enough talking, so I would love to open up the floor to hear from folks. One, around the proposed committee that we have on policy and ordinance, but then also hearing from you all, what are some kind of top priority, high priority committees that you feel like need to be established? And again, we're thinking about kicking off committees by August 1. So what are some areas that you think that we should initially be forming? Of course, that work grows, it ebbs and flows as we have need and our capacity increases both as a commission and as a city.
Chair Malone, can I have a clarifying question
Yes.
on the formation of the subcommittee, please?
Yes.
The question is really around the size of the committee and the composition of the committee.
Yep.
We talked about
They have to have a minimum of 3.
three.
Yep.
How do we include committee members, subcommittee members from outside this forestry commission.
Yes.
That will bring more capacity and
Yep.
expertise to subcommittee, is that?
Thank you for elevating that because we're actually in the process of trying to get feedback from legal on as to how we're going to do that the best way. So we didn't present that initially today just because we're still seeking that guidance, but we want to make sure that when we figure out the exact next steps to having folks who are not a part of the commission be a part of the subcommittees, that we can also release that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions or guidance on potential subcommittees?
I have a comment on I think the policy and ordinance review committee is absolutely essential. I think that will be a pretty in-depth and serious body of work. So that committee would be very busy. There would be a lot to do there. And I think certainly the baseline of understanding Cleveland's existing ordinances, but to the point that Tom raised earlier,
Yes.
our capacity to enforce,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So having the ordinance is one thing, having capacity to actually enforce is entirely another thing. So
Right.
I think that will be a really important standing committee. And I would have interest in participating. But then I also wanted to put forth and propose a budget committee. And as I envision that, it would be a committee that would help make recommendations. So the Division of Urban Forestry puts in its budget requests annually. So the purpose of the committee would be to make a recommendation to Urban Forestry as it's preparing its budget request. So it would be working closely with our urban forester, but it would be making recommendations both for the general fund. So at what staffing level do we currently, not just, I know there's a lot of studying that's going to be going on about staffing levels and all of that. But even just to have that understanding of how do we stack up within the general fund, having that and having the review of the committee. But then I think equally important is the capital budget request. And just again, having a subcommittee of this commission make a recommendation for, I'll give a certain scenario. This is our backlog of stump grinding. We know what our backlog is. We know how much funding it'll take year over year to dig out of the backlog, right? So start to make recommendations and I think that I could see that working well within the structure of a budget committee.
Yeah, great. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you
a great
so
suggestion.
much
Thank
for
you.
proposing a budget committee. Yes.
Great.
Does anyone have any additional proposed committees or even feedback on the ones that we have proposed just to wrap things together? So far we have the potential of a budget committee, policy and ordinance review, and then a special or ad hoc committee for the CTC grant.
Chair Malone, I think I'm particularly in appreciation of the policy committee, again, being a rich and standing committee, because I think while we talk about the enforcement of some of these things, I think there is also the opportunity for us to think about how that policy supports us talking with the different areas of work and finding those seamless transitions and maybe potentially bringing in additional partners that will sort of help make this workflow happen a little better. That is really de-siloing as much as we can and bringing in more partners. So I definitely think that we have a great starting point for some of our subcommittees right now.
Absolutely. I think we have a wonderful starting point for the subcommittees, and even to the point that you raised of increasing capacity of even our own commission to be able to advance and mobilize around the work, being able to bring in external partners who are doing the work on a day-to-day basis, not only is going to increase our own individual capacity, but also constantly reinforcing and elevating transparency. So really appreciate you both for elevating those committees. And I just want to see if there's.
I have one.
Yes.
So I'd like to suggest a tree maintenance committee. So my experience, and it doesn't matter where I am, whether it's in Metro Parks or the city of Cleveland or, I mean, just all over. But generally speaking, we will plant trees. And after that, they'll grow. More times than not, they'll do well. But then a year or two later, like the tree guards are too tight, they're choking the tree, the stakes are falling over or the stakes are still up, but then the ties around the tree are literally choking the tree to death.
Mhm.
So I think there's an opportunity there for, especially in the future with our expected grants. We
Yeah.
plant the trees, and we have to maintain them, what should be in the contracts to help support that. I mean, even I was in Clark Field yesterday, and there's I mean, hundreds of trees planted. They're doing well, but they're so tight
Mhm.
that I just either they have to be removed, or the future won't be bright for these trees.
Yeah.
So lots of opportunities that I've seen, and I think that'd be a good committee for us to take on.
I agree. Thank you.
Do you think specific to like young trees or like trees that are
Yes. Yeah, like 1 to
planted in the last 4 or 5 years?
yeah, I mean
Okay.
1 to 3 years or so.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
in the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, Tom can speak to that, but they do a great job of planting trees, watering, maintaining them, making sure there's mulch going back, and then removing the tree guards as appropriate.
Right.
So it's a really good model to follow, something that affects. So I think we have some success within our committee, within the city, that we can certainly lean on.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for proposing that subcommittee.
Dan, can I ask for clarification? Do you envision that subcommittee developing a list of specifications, or what would the activity of the subcommittee be in terms of taking on that really important challenge that you identify, which is proper establishment and maintenance?
Well, I'm interested in feedback and how that would play out. But I think certainly from a contractual relationship with planting the trees, I think that'd be impactful. I mean, honestly, when I was looking at the trees at Clark Field, if they would have, I mean, and maybe it's, I don't really know, but if there was a specification that talked about, adding, I mean, simple like a pen or an inch, around that tie, then that would give the room for the tree to grow and also get established, and also give us time to, remove that tie, a year or two out. But when it's a newly planted tree, which we're in the spring and it's too tight already, then what do? You cut the tie, or and risk the tree, blowing over and during a windstorm, or do you leave it on there and then the tree basically chokes it down? So I mean, you kind of, which, what do you pick? But certainly, I've seen enough of it in all my work to know there's a difference.
Yeah. Okay.
Dan, you bring up a great point about the maintenance of trees. I think you bring up the point about the physical relationship to the trees and the survivability and other things that come with this. I would also be, I would love to know if in this, where this would fit in, for you, Dan, or for the other members of the commission too, when we start to think about a pool of dollars that can address this sort of maintenance that is not necessarily sometimes falls on the purview of the city, right? How do we sort of support some of that maintenance cost that can come into this, that can help the maintenance of the canopy overall? Whether it is looking into expanding the other programs that we have for our seniors and for people on limited budget. I think definitely interested in exploring those kinds of opportunities and how that sort of fits in with the maintenance capacity. Also talks to the budget a little bit. So I think it's something to think about as we begin to build out where things like that might begin to sit inside.
Yeah, absolutely.
That can support the work that you're talking about.
Yeah, and I was going to say all of the subcommittees that have been mentioned so far speak very closely to one another. We cannot have proper tree maintenance and establishment of both young trees and just maintenance of existing trees without having an efficient and sustainable budget. So that committee would, of course, all of the committees would be speaking and talking directly to each other, but I think we have a really solid core of where we want to start with and then continue to build upon, unless there is anything else that folks would like to elevator have mentioned as a committee, as a potential committee?
Time to nominate chairs for those committees and select members.
So the process for that is we want to have folks throw their hat in the ring, and then the executive committee would follow up with the appointment essentially as chair of that subcommittee.
Well,
So if you have an interest,
I'm certainly interested in serving on the
policy review.
Thanks, Tom. Jenny, I heard you say that you are interested in the policy and ordinance committee as well. Is that correct?
Yes, I'd be interested in serving on that, and I
Okay.
would be willing to both serve and chair the budget committee.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. Thank you.
And I would be willing to serve on the policy committee as well, and also see how that fits, and then also serve on the maintenance committee,
Mhm.
especially with that interest in trying to identify dollars for some of this work.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else volunteer to serve as chair of the maintenance committee?
Do that.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
It's okay, I'm also interested in the budget and the.
Budget and policy?
Thank you, Jose.
Interested in maintenance.
Maintenance. Okay. Thank you. I'll elect myself to serve in the capacity of policy as well as budget.
Great. Thank you. Can I sit on all three?
You can, yes, you
Yeah.
can.
I think
I
that,
wish I could.
yeah. I think it'll be important to inform all these areas.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, my hat's officially in the ring.
And if folks need some additional opportunity to kind of think about what different committees they like to serve on, you
Mhm.
absolutely can take some time and we'll follow up. Again, we mentioned that we're interested in kicking off subcommittees in August. So we will definitely follow up after this meeting. And then I wanted to see if there was anyone who would be interested in throwing their hat in the ring for chair of the ad hoc subcommittee for the CTC grant. I, of course, have to absolve myself.
I'm
Could
wondering
we talk a little bit about the
Yeah.
time that it starts and ends at this
Yeah.
point? For this
August.
particular.
Absolutely. So this grant
Yeah.
is August 1st to August 25th.
I'm
Now,
out.
yeah.
No hacker.
Do you want me to talk a
No,
little bit more
not
about
interested.
what the vision is for?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to share.
Okay, all right. So for those of you who may not know, the city of Cleveland put together an online tree planting request in it was 2020, I believe. And the purpose of that online request was when we're planting for equity, which we started in 2017, we always send residents a letter ahead of time. And we say, our intention is to plant a tree on the tree line in front of your home. You have 2 weeks to opt out. And we give them a number to call. So when those residents opt out of receiving a new tree, we have what we call orphan trees. We've already committed to planting them. So what we did was we wanted to know who in the city of Cleveland wants a tree on their tree lawn. And that was the whole reason behind the program, so that we could very quickly and easily match a tree that's an orphan to a tree steward who we know is going to, take care of it. So since we did not plant any tree lawn trees in 2022, we do have what I would consider a backlog of requests. So what I would like to do is fill as many as I can, essentially, with the CTC grant. And so what that would entail is working with our IT department, because they basically take everything from that online form and it kind of dumps it into a spreadsheet that I have to review. And then I have to put those requests into our system to say, here's a tree site inspection. So let me know if I can fit a small tree, a medium tree, or a large tree on this tree lawn. And then if it is a good site, I'll create a work order to plant a tree there. And then at that point, I just pull those work orders out and I match them with those appropriate sites. Bearing in mind that I would give, I would prefer to stay, fill requests in low canopy areas, right? We still want to consider equity an equitable distribution of the canopy, and then also targeting large planting sites first. Where are the sites where I can plant a large shade tree as opposed to, 50 little crab apples or something? Nothing against crab apples, but it's about more leaves, not more trees. So that's, I guess that would be the ad hoc committee, what they would be tasked with, and obviously working very closely with me and my staff, probably doing like a field visit for how to properly vet, sites using our guidelines. And I think if based on, and then I can just kind of tell you maybe what the scope or how many sites I think that I would be able to plant. I'll tell you right now. So that would be, okay, doing a little math, not doing it very well. So that would be, is this the amount you're going up to?
That's what we're
That's what you're-
looking, maybe
you're
the
looking
flex
at?
sample. Yeah, that's,
Should I,
Yeah.
for the sake of this conversation,
Yep.
should I stay there?
yeah.
Okay. All right, so I think that's my average. Okay, so if we were awarded the Cleveland Tree Coalition grant to plant trees, we'd be looking at roughly 110 trees. Okay, in the city's rights of way. And I probably already have several work orders to plant trees in the system. So it would be like a team just going out, vetting sites, and probably only 50 sites. Because, I just want to be completely frank, is that if folks have been waiting since 2020 to get a tree, I have to go re-inspect that site, because it's very possible that they got a tree through one of the tree giveaways and planted it without a permit or, but yeah, so that's some additional context. Oh, and I'm noticing we're at 5:27 and we
Yes.
still have to do public comment.
Absolutely.
So if folks want to consider that, consider the subcommittees. Thank you for everybody who offered for those three.
Yeah.
And then just reach out to executive committee members
Yeah.
after you've had time to kind of think about it.
Yeah, so we're actually going to send we're going to send out a follow-up email with, of course, the slide decks that we presented on today. And if everyone could respond by 7/18 with their interested subcommittee assignment, that would be very helpful. So we can begin getting the ball rolling around the creation of those actual subcommittees. And then we're also going to follow up with those who have thrown their hat in the ring to be chair of those subcommittees. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate today's dialogue around the creation of subcommittees, because I know we're all excited to start them.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, well, we are running very tight on time, and I always like to be respectful of folks' time, especially this late in the day on a Tuesday. So I wanted to go ahead and open up the floor. We did receive public comment. And just to kind of give rules around our process for public comment, we allow folks to pre-register 5 minutes prior to the start of any meeting, and that pre-registration can be done either in person over there in the sign-ins area or online. We did receive one comment, which I will actually, does anyone have
Excuse
it
me,
out?
Chair Malone, I want to check the sign-in sheet to see
Okay.
if there's any.
Perfect.
Oh, okay, thanks,
Thank you so
Tom.
much,
Did
Tom.
anyone make a?
Brittany, do you
Request.
have the comment that we received online? Do you mind pulling that?
Okay.
'Cause I did not. Yeah.
We have two public comments.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, but they didn't
have
agenda item.
For this meeting
Okay.
by Mr. Brett Wickler from Ward 6. His comment states, in spring 2022, 7 new trees were planted along Williams on my block in the tree line. They were never staked, mulched, or watershed, and several have fallen over during storms or been pulled out of the ground. There are only 3 left, and only 2 of them are alive. How does the city track newly planted trees, and will these trees be replaced?
Thank you so much for that public comment. We want to make note that we have received that, and as part of our procedure, we receive all public comment during the section and then follow up at a later date. Vice Chair Kip will be following up directly in regards to that particular question.
Thank you, Chair Malone. I also have, so I'm not sure if this is a it's registration form for public comment. I have 2 names on here, but I don't have any information about what agenda item the individual wanted to speak on.
It's okay. I think that
Okay.
was a mix-up with
Okay,
folks thinking that
maybe
was a
a
sign-in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, yeah. So there's, I I think this was, yeah,
Yeah.
just confused as a
We have
sign-in sheet.
Thomas at the top, and then there is a
William?
William, I think Richter?
William? Nope.
No? Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Well, we do not have any additional public comment. So for the sake of that, I just want to give my last remarks. I really, really appreciate, as always, you all dedicating your time and serving as members of this Urban Forestry Commission. I also want to thank folks who are in attendance today of our meeting, both in person and virtually. We really appreciate your commitment and advocacy and attendance of these meetings with us. Really looking forward to the opportunity for us to begin getting our hands and feet dirty through our creation of subcommittees and being able to continue to advance our work. But all in all, thank you so much for attending today's meeting, and I officially call it to adjournment.
Right. You need to make a motion. to
Yes, make it,
adjourn.
I'm sorry, I always forget the motion
that's
at the
okay.
end. Thank you.
I like a clap
I'd
better.
like to, yeah, my dramatic clap.